We're looking at this document, Developing Reading Skills in Higher Education by Chris Ireland. So what's the main argument this document is making?
Well, it really hits the nail on the head when it calls critical reading a fundamental skill in higher education.
Yeah,
It mentions the work of Richardson from 2004 and Wilson and his colleagues also in 2004, and they all stress how crucial it is for university
Yeah.
students. But then, as Hayford pointed out way back in 2001, this isn't something that students just automatically have when they start university.
Right.
And Ireland's document goes on to highlight some big roadblocks that can
Wow.
really get in the way of developing this skill.
Yeah.
Like Shannon's research in 2017 suggests that those deeply held beliefs we all have can act like really strong filters,
Yeah.
making it tough to look objectively at new information that goes against those beliefs.
It brings up some really compelling barriers, like these deeply held beliefs, as Shannon's work in 2017 pointed out, can really impede the development of critical reading skills.
Yeah.
And then there's the thing that Murilo Rojas and Zuniga Vargas pointed out in 2017,
Yeah.
this tendency to only focus on the literal meaning of texts. It seems like the first challenge is just realizing that critical reading isn't just passively absorbing words. It's got to be a much more active and engaged approach to the material. It's not enough to just understand what the words say on the surface, is it?
Yeah, that's a really key difference. Critical reading means you're actively working with the text,
Yeah.
questioning what's underneath the words, evaluating the evidence, and looking beyond that surface level, meaning, the activities in the document are really designed to make students start thinking consciously about what critical reading is and how it's different from just reading to understand.
Yeah.
They're like practical exercises
Yep.
to help you move past that passive reading.
So let's jump into some of those exercises.
Okay.
The first one focuses on ambiguous language. And it starts with the sentence, "The chicken is ready to eat."
Yeah.
Now, when you first see that, what's like the first picture or thought that pops into your head?
I think for most people, the first thing they picture, and this is shown in picture 1, is like a cooked chicken on a plate ready to be eaten. It's the most common and probably the simplest way to understand the sentence in our daily lives.
Right.
It shows how being familiar with certain situations shapes our initial understanding.
Exactly. But then the exercise throws in a curveball with picture 2,
Right.
which shows a live chicken looking at food. And all of a sudden that same sentence has a totally different meaning.
Yeah.
The chicken is about to eat. And it's such a simple but really effective way to show that language isn't always as clear-cut as we think it is.
Right.
The big takeaway here, as the document points out, is that it's super important to think about whether there might be other ways to understand what we're reading. Even when that first obvious meaning seems like, it's got to be right.
Yeah, it makes you pause and think beyond that first instinct.
It does, and the exercise doesn't stop there. It keeps pushing us to think about even less common interpretations.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so then it gives us the sentence, "I saw her duck under the table."
Okay.
Now, most people are going to quickly see those two most common meanings, both having to do with the word saw, as in, seeing something.
Right.
Either you saw someone's pet duck or you saw her physically lower herself under the table.
Yeah.
Picture 3 helps us see that it seems like our brains are wired to go for the most frequent meanings of words first,
Yeah.
right? Those are the interpretations that just pop into your head instantly.
Yeah.
But then comes this surprise, picture 4.
Which shows someone sawing a duck like the bird, not the action. And that is definitely the least frequent interpretation.
Yeah.
And the document even points out that it usually surprises students.
Right.
So it really hammers home the point that even after we think we've thought of all the possible explanations, there might be even more, maybe less conventional ones that we haven't even considered yet.
It challenges us to expand our thinking beyond the obvious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the next activity shifts our focus a bit to ambiguous data.
Okay.
And what's cool here is that instead of using numbers, it uses images, pictures 5 and 6, to make this point about interpretation. So let's start with picture 5. What's the main thing we learn from this image?
Well, picture 5 is a classic example of what we call an ambiguous figure, like a visual puzzle.
Yeah.
Some people are going to see one shape right away, while others might see something completely different. Or maybe they'll even see both interpretations switching back and forth between them.
And the document even says that some people might not see any clear shape at first and need a little help to spot the different possibilities.
Oh, yeah.
And this really neatly shows that even something we think of as objective data, in this case a picture, can be seen and understood in multiple ways, even ways that contradict each other.
Yeah.
It shows how active our brains are in making meaning
It's like a powerful metaphor for data in general. We often think of data as just facts,
Right.
no arguments, but the way we look at it, the framework we use can lead to very different conclusions.
Absolutely.
Then we have picture 6, that famous rotating image that you can see as either a young princess or an old woman.
Yeah.
This visual illusion is meant to highlight a slightly different aspect of interpretation, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Picture 6 really emphasizes how much our perspective shapes how we understand things. So you have the exact same visual information, but it can be easily interpreted as either a young princess looking off into the distance or an old woman looking down. And it all depends on how our brains process those lines and shadows and the whole shape of the image.
Yeah.
It's a great reminder that our individual point of view, our angle of approach, if you will, really influences how we see and make sense of the same evidence. It underlines that subjective element that's always there in interpretation.
Okay, so moving on from ambiguous data,
Yeah.
the activity then explores this idea of experts using picture 7, which shows 4 groups of people from different TV shows.
Okay.
And the first question it asks is, what do these 4 groups of people all have in common?
Yeah.
And the most obvious answer is that they're all considered experts in their fields.
Right.
But the important follow-up question is, despite being experts, do they always agree in their judgments? And the answer, as anyone who's seen these kinds of shows knows, is a big fat no.
Right.
The document then breaks down each panel of experts talking about the different dance backgrounds and specialties on Strictly Come Dancing, the different artistic fields of the judges on China's Got Talent, the various playing positions and tactical views of the soccer commentators on Match of the Day, and even the kind of unusual inclusion of a professional eater on Chinese MasterChef.
Interesting.
This diversity within expertise is really important, isn't it?
It is. Just like those TV judges, researchers come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
They use different methods in their investigations, and they might have different values that can affect how they interpret things.
Right.
So when we're reading academic papers and research findings, it's really crucial to be aware of these potential differences in perspective.
Yeah.
And to actively look for research that might offer different or even opposing views to the ones we've already come across. Having a healthy skepticism and wanting diverse perspectives is super important for real understanding.
The last activity in this section is called, Does Clock Watching Make You Clockwise?
This experiment uses picture 8. Students are shown this image for a bit and asked to study it.
Okay.
Then the image is taken away, and they're shown a modified version, picture 9, where a part is missing. And they're asked to draw in the missing part.
Interesting.
It's a subtle but effective way to test their recall.
Yeah, and this is where the power of what we already know really comes in.
It does, as picture 10 shows most students, because they're so used to seeing the Roman numeral 4 as IV,
Right.
will incorrectly draw IV in the blank space.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, this disconnect between what they saw and what they remember or believe to be true.
It is, and the document quotes Berger from 2019, who says, reading is an interaction between the reader and the text. And this experiment really shows that interaction in action
Yeah.
and how our own internal knowledge framework really shapes how we understand and remember things, sometimes even changing our memory of the original information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think our journey really shows how important it is to pay attention to even the tiniest details.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those tiny details hold these crucial clues that can challenge our assumptions. That exploring the ambiguity of language and data underlines the fact that information isn't always as straightforward as it seems,
Right.
and that actively looking for different interpretations is a vital skill.
Yeah.
Recognizing that even experts have different perspectives because of their unique backgrounds encourages us to engage with their opinions in a more critical way. But maybe the biggest takeaway comes from that clock watching activity. It really powerfully shows the often hidden influence of our own beliefs and assumptions on how we perceive and ultimately understand the world around us.
And all of that directly addresses what you, our listener, were hoping to get out of this.
Yeah.
A way to process information efficiently but thoroughly, to have those aha moments without feeling overwhelmed by all the data out there.
Right.
So becoming aware of these potential traps, the detail we might miss, the hidden ambiguity, the expert's particular viewpoint on our own ingrained assumptions, that's the first step to becoming a more effective and insightful learner and information consumer.
It is. And it leads to a really important question for you to think about. What was the last piece of information you came across that really surprised you, or maybe even challenged what you thought you knew? Could any of the things we've talked about today, the importance of those tiny details, the possibility of different interpretations, the influence of the source's perspective, or the impact of your own assumptions, have played a role in how you first understood or maybe misunderstood that information? Actively applying these insights as you learn new things and engage with new information can be a really eye-opening experience.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's it for this deep dive. I hope you enjoyed it and that you learned something new.
Me too.
And we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.